You're standing on a packed subway train during rush hour. Nobody's talking. Most people aren't even looking at each other. Heads down, eyes on phones. Everyone wrapped up in their own little world. Then something odd happens. One passenger suddenly looks up toward a spot near the ceiling. That's it. No gesture. No words. Just a glance. A couple seconds later, someone else looks up. Then another. Then three more. Before long, people scattered across the carriage are all staring at the same place. No announcement. No alarm. No one saying, "Hey, look over there." Just eyes. And if you think about it, you've probably watched this happen yourself. Maybe on a train. Maybe in an airport terminal. Maybe walking down a busy street. One person notices something. 10 people notice it next. A private moment somehow becomes public. So here's the question. How can something as small as a movement inside someone's eyes redirect the attention of an entire group? And why are humans so freakishly good at this? Most people assume eyes evolved for one reason, to help us see. Fair enough. But what if that's only part of the story? What if eyes aren't just receivers of information? What if they're transmitters too? Because your eyes don't merely reveal what you're looking at. They quietly invite other minds to look there with you. Now picture yourself in the wild. Every movement means something. Every sound carries information. Every glance gives something away. If you're a predator, looking at your target for too long can expose your intentions. If you're prey, revealing where you're about to run could be costly. In nature, information has value, and valuable things tend to be hidden. So you'd expect evolution to favor concealment. You'd expect eyes that keep intentions private, eyes that mask attention, eyes that don't advertise what the brain is doing. And across most species, that's pretty much what we see, which makes humans strange. Wait, actually, strange might be understating it. Why are our eyes so easy to read? Why do we have large white sclera surrounding dark pupils, creating a signal visible from several feet away? At first glance, it feels backward. Not concealment. Exposure. Not secrecy. Visibility. Not hiding information. Broadcasting it. It's almost as if human eyes evolved to do the opposite of what evolution usually does. And that's the puzzle. Because while most animals seem built to protect information, humans appear unusually willing to share it. Why? Why would a species make its attention easier to read? And what if the most important thing your eyes do isn't helping you see the world, but helping other people see what you're seeing? To answer that, we need to go back to the beginning of our story. Researchers estimate that Homo sapiens emerged around 300,000 years ago. Those early humans weren't physical superstars. They weren't the fastest runners. They weren't the strongest fighters. They didn't have claws. They didn't have fangs. They didn't have natural armor. Compared to plenty of animals, they looked under-equipped. And yet they ended up everywhere. So what did they have? Imagine a small band of humans moving across open terrain. One person notices tracks pressed into the dirt. Another catches movement in the distance. A third hears something rustling where nobody else is listening. Each individual sees only a fragment. Only together do they see the whole picture. That was the advantage. Not individual intelligence. Collective intelligence. As human groups became more cooperative, survival stopped being a solo activity. People hunted together, learned together, raised children together. Knowledge no longer lived inside one skull. Knowledge began flowing between skulls. That's a huge shift. Because once cooperation becomes your greatest strength, attention becomes valuable in a completely different way. Not just your attention, shared attention. The ability to make someone else notice what you noticed. The ability to align two minds. The ability to create a common reality. Not stronger muscles. Stronger coordination. Not sharper eyesight. Shared eyesight. Fossil records suggest human societies became increasingly dependent on cooperation over time. And cooperation depends on something surprisingly simple. Getting two minds focused on the same thing at the same moment. That's where the story starts. Because the moment humans began relying on one another, attention stopped being purely personal. It became a shared resource. You can see this process playing out in one of the most ordinary moments of human life. A 1-year-old child watching an adult. At around 12 months of age, something remarkable begins to happen. The adult looks toward an object. The baby follows. Simple. Almost boring, honestly. But developmental psychologists see something profound hidden inside that tiny interaction. Because before a child learns grammar, before they learn thousands of words, before they can explain a single thought, they learn something even more fundamental. They learn that attention can be shared. Think about what that means. The child isn't just looking at an object. The child is realizing that another mind is directed toward that object too. A parent glances toward a bird. The child follows the gaze. Now both are focused on the same thing. For the first time, two minds are linked by a common target. Researchers call this joint attention. And once that ability appears, development accelerates. Words become easier. Ideas become easier. Culture becomes easier. Because language isn't just sound. Language is shared attention wrapped in sound. If someone says, "Look at that," those words only work because two people can coordinate their focus. That's easy to miss. But it's huge. Before children learn words, they learn where words point. Before children learn language, they learn attention. Not vocabulary first. Shared focus first. Not communication first. Coordination first. One influential idea in developmental psychology suggests humans possess an unusual ability to understand what other people are attending to and intending. That ability lets children absorb information from older generations with astonishing efficiency. A child doesn't need to rediscover fire. A child doesn't need to reinvent tools. A child follows attention, and knowledge pours in. Here's a thought worth keeping. Human knowledge travels through eyes before it travels through words. But that raises an obvious question. If shared attention is so powerful, why don't our closest relatives do it the same way? After all, chimpanzees aren't strangers to intelligence. Gorillas are intelligent. Orangutans are intelligent. They're all primates. They're all close relatives. So where exactly does the difference appear? At first, the answer seems almost disappointingly small. The eyes. Look carefully. Most non-human primates have darker eyes overall. The sclera, the white area surrounding the iris, is usually far less visible than it is in humans. That matters more than it sounds. Because if the eyes blend into the rest of the face, figuring out exactly where someone is looking becomes harder. Researchers studying gaze-following behavior have repeatedly noticed an interesting pattern. Chimpanzees often rely more heavily on head direction than eye direction. In other words, if a chimp wants to know what another chimp is paying attention to, the position of the head may provide more useful information than the eyes themselves. Humans are different. Sometimes a tiny eye movement is enough. A fraction of a second. A slight shift. Message received. Your brain is extraordinarily sensitive to gaze. You can often tell when someone is looking directly at you. You can often tell where someone is looking. You can often tell when their attention suddenly changes. 3 abilities. 1 system. Wait, wouldn't that be risky? Wouldn't it be smarter to keep your intentions hidden? For most species, probably yes. But humans increasingly succeeded through cooperation rather than competition within their own groups. And cooperation rewards different traits. Cooperation rewards trust. Cooperation rewards predictability. Cooperation rewards readable intentions. The easier it becomes to share attention, the easier it becomes to coordinate action. So in a strange way, human eyes seem to advertise information that other animals often conceal. Not because humans became weaker, because humans became more interconnected. Now zoom out, way out, from a parent and child, to a crowd, to a city, to an entire civilization. Something fascinating happens whenever groups of humans suddenly focus on the same thing. One person notices danger. Others notice it too. One person spots an opportunity. Others lock onto it. One person identifies a problem. Others begin working on it. Attention spreads. Information spreads. Action spreads. That's the sequence. And once you notice it, you start seeing it everywhere. Emergency response teams. Rescue operations. Financial markets. Busy intersections. Sports stadiums filled with thousands of people. Again and again, one person's attention becomes the starting point for collective action. A chain reaction of minds. And that's the deeper connection. The same mechanism helping a baby learn language may also help entire societies coordinate at scale. Different environments. Same principle. Shared attention is one of humanity's quiet superpowers. It helps strangers cooperate. It helps knowledge accumulate across generations. If you're still with me, hit subscribe, because what's coming next may completely change how you think about your own eyes. Because this story isn't ultimately about seeing. It's about synchronization. And that difference turns out to be bigger than it sounds. At this point, someone might be thinking, hold on, are humans actually unique here? Fair question. Because once you start looking into the science, the picture gets messy, eh? And honestly, that's usually a sign you're getting closer to the truth. Take dogs. Researchers have found that domestic dogs are surprisingly good at following human gaze. In some situations, they don't just respond to pointing gestures. They pay attention to where humans are looking. Think about that for a second. A species that split from our evolutionary path tens of millions of years ago can still extract useful information from our eyes. And dogs aren't the only example. Some social animals appear capable of using gaze cues under certain circumstances. They can notice where another individual is looking. They can react. They can learn. So the ability itself isn't exclusive to humans. Wait, doesn't that solve the mystery? Not quite. Because this story was never about whether other animals can read eyes. It's about how far the system goes, how often it's used, how deeply it's woven into everyday life. Eye reading exists elsewhere. Humans just seem to have taken it further than anyone else. Not a different game. The most extreme version of the game. And that brings us to the payoff. The answer people usually expect is simple. Human white eyes evolved for communication. Neat. Elegant. Easy to remember. The problem? Evolution almost never works that neatly. Researchers have proposed multiple pressures that may have worked together across countless generations. Large-scale cooperation, sexual selection, reliable social signaling, cultural learning, different forces, same destination. Imagine two strangers meeting for the first time. One person's attention is easy to read. The other's isn't. Who seems easier to understand? Who feels more predictable? Who feels safer to cooperate with? Nobody consciously calculates these things. But small advantages accumulate. Generation after generation. Interaction after interaction. And eventually tiny preferences can reshape a species. Not because readable eyes guarantee honesty. They don't. Humans lie. Humans deceive. Humans manipulate. But readable attention lowers uncertainty. And uncertainty is expensive. Especially in societies built on trust, teaching, coordination, and cooperation. That's why the simplest explanation may also be the wrong one. White eyes didn't evolve only for communication. They may have evolved because human societies increasingly rewarded minds that could synchronize with other minds. That's a much bigger idea. Think of human eyes less as a visual feature and more as a protocol. A biological protocol. One brain broadcasts attention. Another brain receives it. One brain highlights something important. Another brain locks onto the same target. Not merely vision. Coordination. Not merely perception. Synchronization. Not merely an eye. A social technology. And suddenly the story changes. Because human white eyes stop looking like a strange anatomical detail. They start looking like infrastructure. Tiny infrastructure. But infrastructure nonetheless. The signal is small. The consequences are enormous. And this is where the story becomes personal. Because all of this is happening inside your life right now. Not occasionally. Constantly. You use this ancient system every day without noticing. You sit in a classroom and your eyes drift toward whatever the teacher is focused on. You spot someone in a crowd staring upward, and, before you even think about it, you look too. You feel that odd sensation that someone is watching you, then turn around and discover you were right. No words. No instructions. No conscious planning. Just ancient circuitry doing what it evolved to do. The mechanism is old. The world is new. That's the strange combination. Think about how much of your attention is influenced by other people. A friend notices something. Now you're noticing it. A coworker becomes concerned about a problem. Suddenly you're thinking about it too. A group becomes fascinated by an idea. Soon thousands of people are talking about it. Attention moves. Information moves. Culture moves. One after another. Like dominoes. Imagine every gaze you follow as a tiny thread. By itself, almost meaningless. Together, a network. A living network made of human minds. People often say humans are social animals. That's true, but it doesn't quite capture what's special. Because what makes humans unusual isn't simply that we live together. It's that we align attention together. And here's the deeper realization. You are never thinking entirely alone. Part of your attention is constantly interacting with the attention of people around you. Every day, your brain participates in a network built from shared attention. Now let's go back to that subway carriage. The one from the beginning. One passenger looked up. That's all. No speech. No gesture. No announcement. Just a change in attention. Yet somehow that tiny act spread across the carriage. One mind became several. Several became dozens. Not because anyone was forced. Not because anyone was instructed. Because human brains are naturally tuned to follow where other human minds are pointing. The first passenger didn't transmit information the way a speaker broadcasts a message. He did something subtler. He opened a door. Other minds stepped through it. And once you start looking at human history through that lens, the pattern appears everywhere. Language, teaching, science, religion, art. 5 different achievements. One underlying mechanism. Shared attention. Millions of species have lived on Earth. Millions have hunted. Millions have competed. Millions have survived. But one species learned how to coordinate minds at extraordinary scale. One species turned glances into learning. One species turned learning into culture. One species turned culture into civilization. Maybe civilization didn't begin with the first city. Maybe it didn't begin with the first tool. Maybe it didn't even begin with the first word. Maybe it began with something smaller. 2 humans noticing the same thing and realizing they were noticing it together. That possibility is still with you. Right now, hidden inside your eyes. A tiny signal. A civilization-sized consequence. First we shared a glance. Then we shared a world. If you enjoyed this journey into what makes humans different, subscribe.